here with Deacon Jim Vargas. You're the president and CEO of St. Joe's Villages.
Father Joe's Villages, yes.
Father Joe's.
He may be a saint one day, Father, but right now it's just Father Joe's Villages.
And you were telling me your organization has like 450 employees.
Yeah, at any given time.
Yeah. Any given time, and you work with homeless people, trying to find solutions, housing for them.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us more about the organization.
Sure. It's the oldest organization in Southern California, a homeless services provider, and also the largest. As you mentioned, you were between 450 to 500 employees. It's a big operation. We've been around since 1950. And it's basically the comprehensive services that we have, anywhere from our federally qualified health center. So, I mean, we know a lot of people who are homeless have health issues, many health issues, comorbidities, in fact, as well. And we have a therapeutic child care center that works with our kids. We have an employment center that helps individuals gain marketable skills through our vocational training and then find jobs. And we know that with marketable skills come jobs, and with jobs come income, and then self-sufficiency, right? And then we have a whole shelter system that we have in place. On any given night, we provide some level of shelter, anywhere from emergency shelter all the way up to affordable housing, to about 3,000 individuals on any given night. So, and we are developers of affordable housing as well. So it's the whole gamut in between there. So we're really blessed to have the comprehensive services that are necessary to help those who are on the streets. And it's not a cookie cutter approach, because people are complex. Human beings are complex. Where they are in their journeys are also very, very different and unique. So we are responsive to what their particular needs are.
And you're located in San Diego?
We are.
Is that where all the housing and everything is in San Diego? Or?
In various areas within San Diego.
Okay.
We have our campus near our ballpark, actually, our baseball ballpark, Petco Park. That's our main campus, but we also have affordable housing in various other places throughout the county of San Diego.
And Father Joe started the organization in San Diego, or is it New York?
No, he started in San Diego. He was a New Yorker, interestingly enough. He and I grew up in the same area in the South Bronx.
Oh, wow.
He predated me by 15 years, because he was 15 years my senior. We didn't know one another. We actually grew up within 2 blocks of one another in the South Bronx, and that's interesting.
Yeah.
He didn't become a priest in New York. He moved out to Los Angeles initially, and then to San Diego, and became a priest in San Diego. Just like I didn't become a deacon in New York either. I moved out to San Diego and I was ordained a deacon in San Diego. So we had almost similar paths, if you think about it.
Right.
And then he was tapped by the bishop back in 1982 to basically grow this organization from an organization that was very small, providing very little shelter and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, to what it became, to his credit, very comprehensive services that we still continue. And so in time, I was tapped to lead this organization 7 years ago. So it's interesting, our paths, right, from the South Bronx to this place, which now bears his name, Father Joe's Villages.
Is he still alive?
He passed last year at the age of 80, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, he just passed less than a year ago.
Yeah. To me, what's interesting too is that, I guess it makes sense. I mean, you're providing housing in the most difficult place to provide housing, right? In the United States is California, and housing costs are just crazy, right?
It is crazy. I mean, just this week, there was a report that the median price of a house in San Diego has now climbed to $775,000. The median price, $2,600 to $3,000, is the average price of a rental. Of a home. So think about that. And then you couple it with the fact that it has a very low rental vacancy rate. We have a vacancy rate about 3 to 3.2%, which means no sooner does an apartment come on the market, it gets scooped up. In fact, they're bidding wars. So it's a toxic combination for those who we serve. The prices are very high, and there isn't enough of it. And it's very expensive to live in San Diego. Yeah. So people fall onto the streets.
And I've heard in general, I don't know if it's true, that there's a big movement towards pushing just have everybody renting. And it's kind of like big corporations owning a lot of housing. And then even people that are working and can support themselves are like tending to rent more now. And to me, it's kind of scary. Just you have the corporation having all this control, But do you see that out there, especially
Well,
like?
you see it somewhat,
Mm.
and whether it's rental properties that are owned by corporations, or just a feeling amongst young people that they can't afford to buy a home, and so
Yeah,
as a result, they rent. I mean, the American dream was to own a home, if you remember,
right.
back
Mm.
when. And it's not that that isn't still the dream, but it's just that it's out of sight for certain populations. I mean, even young people who are educated and have good
Right.
jobs because of where they are situated. I mean, if you're situated in a less expensive place like Alabama, as an example,
Right.
it's one
Right.
thing. But if you're situated in a place where the median price of a home is $775,000, you may be college educated, have a good job, and have decent income. But that's expensive to try to
Yeah.
reach. So people resort to renting.
We go out every year to San Francisco for the Walk for Life. One year we went to Menlo Park and visited the seminary there and saw some of the high tech places, did some videos out there. But, the Menlo Park especially is just like insane housing prices. And I look around, I look on the horizon or whatever, I see all this space. I just wonder, why aren't they building out there? What's up? Isn't it just build more houses, prices come down, or?
Well, yes, and it should be that easy just to build a house. I'll give you an example. About 5 years ago, we determined that it was necessary. Yes, we've been in the affordable housing market, builders of affordable housing for the last 20, 25 years, but we really decided that we wanted to get more into that aspect of it because while we provided a lot of shelter beds, and shelter beds are important to take people off the streets in the immediacy and start working with them. At the end of the day, a shelter is not a home. An apartment is a home, and there isn't enough of it. So we said, you know what? We're going to we're going to commit to building out 2,000 units in the San Diego market. Quite an audacious goal. We didn't know how we would do it initially, all right, but with God's help, right? So we embarked on it from inception to the point where I just cut a ribbon on a 14-story, 407 home facility just this past month, all right? 5 years. It took 5 years to come up with the planning process. It took 5 years to raise the money. I couldn't break ground until all the money was raised. It's a $150 million endeavor. All right. The 95% of it, the vast majority of it is public funding, federal tax credits, state tax credits, and some municipal funds as well. One philanthropic portion of $10 million. All right. A gentleman, Terry Castor is his name, great philanthropist and Catholic philanthropist in San Diego. He didn't want it named after him. It's named St. Teresa of Calcutta Villa because he knew Mother Teresa. He worked with Mother Teresa. He has a
Right.
love for Mother Teresa. And so how apropos that he wanted it named after her
Right.
because she took people off the streets, which is what we do. Right. So I love the fact that it's called St. Teresa of Calcutta Villa. The largest of its kind ever in San Diego, ever for our population. It took 5 years to do. And people at the beginning were telling me, why are you even doing this? It's going to take forever. People are suffering on the streets now. And I would say to them, yes, they're suffering on the streets now, and we need to take them off the streets as best we can. But at the end of the day, we don't have enough affordable housing. The housing system in California is clogged as a result. Since there isn't enough affordable housing, there isn't also enough shelter beds. So you leave people on the streets. San Diego has the seventh largest homeless population in the U.S. Approximately 4,000 individuals, half of whom are on the streets. So I said, if you build affordable housing, you'll be able to free up some of the shelter beds, and that will allow us to take more people off the streets. So even though, yes, it takes a long time because of bureaucracy, a lot of permitting and the like, and raising the capital, you have to embark on it or you'll never get to the end goal.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've embarked on it. And it's not just new construction. We also are purchasing motels to refurbish them. And that's, we were able to do that, and within 7 months, we refurbished a motel into 83 spanking new units. I mean, permanent units with their own little, space-wise, their studios, about 325 square feet, not very large, but very dignified. They have their own living space with a kitchenette. They have a bathroom. They have community space in the area. It's a gated community. I mean, it's very nice for our individuals, and these are individuals actually in that particular complex. It's called permanent supportive housing because the individuals who reside there have some level of disability. So it could be physical, it could be behavioral health challenges, maybe mental health challenges, substance use disorder challenges, and so they get a lot of comprehensive support. So it's not just a matter of just placing individuals into this housing. 96% of those who we place into housing retain their housing long term because of the ongoing comprehensive support. That's absolutely critical.
And so when we say affordable housing, like these people would be paying rent, right?
They pay rent.
Yeah.
Yeah, they either pay rent because some of them work,
Mm-hmm.
and so sometimes we help them find employment actually through our employment and education center, or they have SSI checks, disability checks as an example. They have vouchers from the city, so somehow rent is paid, and it's through that rent that we're able to pay for the operations of the building and also the services that we provide.
And is there a difficulty? I know typically some of my family's been into rental properties and stuff, and it's a big headache for them. And has it been that way for you all? Like, I don't know how to politely say it, but if you have someone like maybe with some real mental health challenges, and has that been a real difficult thing?
It can be, yeah. Especially when you mention mental health challenges.
Yeah.
Just the other day, I get a call over the weekend, and I'm told, Deacon, one of our apartments burned out because the tenant left his stove on. And so, thank God, though, it was contained to this one apartment, and no one was hurt.
Right.
And most important, that's the first thing I asked: was anyone hurt?
Yeah.
No one was hurt. And it was then my second question is, how many apartments did it affect? And it had affected just that one individual apartment, but it was gutted. It was gutted, right? So that's just an example. Right. Or people sometimes leave the water on, and as a result, it floods a number of apartments, and you have to mitigate that. And so, they're the challenges, Father, that we have.
And then, like, if someone is maybe doing criminal activity or something, it's tough to get them to evict them, right? Is it impossible almost, or is it?
It's very difficult to get them evicted. You're absolutely right. And we encounter that as well. And you just have to go through the system. Mm-hmm. I mean, we keep our legal staff busy as a result of that, right? And we don't like to put anyone on the street. Right. That's the antithesis of why we exist, right? We take people off the streets. But at the end of the day, sometimes you're left with no alternative to do just that. We either because a person is of harm to him or herself or others, and that's just not right.
Right.
Yeah.
And what is it like? How would you describe the famed California bureaucracy? I can't imagine. Maybe comparable to New York City, but I don't. How do you describe that bureaucracy you got to work with, and how do you work with it? I mean, what is it?
Well, you work with it. We must, all right, and so we work. I spend a lot of time working with the mayor or the governor's office or the city council members as well. This is a priority for all of them, all right, and so they say. I mean, because how can it not be a priority? It's front and center homelessness, right? And so that said, there is bureaucracy. I'll give you a prime example. That building to which I just referred, that St. Teresa of Calcutta, almost at the 11th hour when we needed to close escrow in order to be able to break ground, we found that we got a call from the state. And they said, oh, by the way, we just realized that you've been granted 2 different $10 million grants for your project, and you can only have one. And we kind of shook our heads and said, well, what do you mean we can only have one, right? And they said, well, yeah, it was all bureaucratic as far as I'm concerned, right? And so we weren't going to leave. We weren't prepared to leave $10 million on the table. And so I have a great team. They're bright and they're passionate. And they got together with the legal team, and we've bifurcated the building. So actually that building is 2 legal entities in one. Why? So that we could have both $10 million grants, and we got it done, right? And so to look at it, you would never know that.
Right.
But think about what that did. As a result, there were additional resources. There were 2 closings, and the expense associated with 2 closings. All right, and that's what the bureaucracy does. We could have built that building. I mentioned it was $150 million. We could have built that building. We estimate for maybe 10 to 20% less, if you could get to that red tape and through the permitting and the regulatory faster. Right. And those are tax dollars. If you think about it, those are tax dollars that could be saved, right? It could be used then for other buildings. So I've mentioned that. Yeah, I've spoken to our state legislators and used that as an example. And just recently, the governor had two individuals come down into our building, and I mentioned that to them, and they kind of looked at me. They took notes, right? And they said they were going to go back and look into that. And I hope that they do. And there are a lot of those examples that exist on the books, and you have to scratch your head and ask why.
Right.
What's the good reason for having them, right? So, yeah.
But you mentioned that everybody wants this, so I imagine that does help a lot, that it's a good work and everybody can recognize the value of it, especially maybe people in big fat bureaucracies in government. That's maybe why they're there, to help people, you know. So is there that kind of working together, maybe, that a common motivation that helps it get through as well? I mean, it's just not two groups,
Two factions, right? Right.
Yeah, they're like, one guy's just not trying to make a lot of money, get as much as he can. They're trying to help people. So I think a lot of people could get on board with that to make it happen.
Right. And so there's collaboration as a result. There's a competitive aspect of it, obviously. There's just so much money to go around. And so what I'm doing, others are doing as well.
Right.
And so we're all competing for the same dollars within the same pot. So there is that aspect of it. But of late, because of COVID as an example, there have been a lot more dollars that have been funneled down to help with the homelessness issue. And so that's going to, you know, I always tell myself, my staff, I should say, we need to seize the opportunity, because these dollars are not going to last forever, right? And so now is the time really to strike while the iron's hot, so to speak, and really get as much of the funding as possible in order to help with our various endeavors, whether it be the shelter programs or the affordable housing.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the homelessness problem in general in America. What are some of the stats, numbers on that?
Well, it's an issue across the United States. You know, we have in this country, the United States, we have 580,000 homeless. 580,000, 40% of whom are on the streets and unsheltered. The others have some level of shelter, but they're still homeless, right? In this great country of ours, you know, that we should be ashamed that we have that many people who are on the streets. 28% of those who are homeless, of that number, are in California. So California has a big homeless situation. Not surprisingly, New York has the highest homeless population.
For one city.
For one city, yeah. And then it's followed by LA, then by Seattle.
What are those numbers? Do you know
New York has about 85,000, give or take. I mean, don't hold me exactly to these numbers, but about 85,000. California has, LA has more along the lines of about 55,000 or so. Then it drops quite a bit when you to Seattle. Seattle has about 15,000. And then you come back into California, where you have the Bay Area, and you have San Jose, and you have Oakland and San Francisco. They're the next ones in that order.
So Seattle's more than San Francisco?
It is. Okay. It is, yeah. And you can see it, as you mentioned, when you go to San Francisco, you can see it. Seattle's the same way. It's very much in your face. And then it drops down to San Diego, where it's the 7th largest. And we have about 8,000, half of whom are on the streets. Of those who are unsheltered across the U.S., by the way, 50% of them, 50% of the unsheltered are in California, right? So but California has quite a number who are unsheltered. I mean, when you think about 50% of those who are unsheltered within the United States, 50% of them in California itself. So, yeah, these are big numbers.
What happens? I just was reading a news story where I think it was either Portland or Seattle, but it was making these greater efforts to clean up homelessness, and that's some kind of terminology like they use. What happens when a city decides to do that generally? What does that look like practically?
Well, usually it manifests in enforcement, basically. All right, and it depends on the city, but some cities do choose enforcement. There are laws that preclude you from doing that if you don't have shelter beds, though, right? So there was a actually a court case out of Boise that basically that applies to the entire United States, whereby if you're going to force someone off the street, you have to be able to provide a shelter bed. Otherwise, they have no option,
Right.
and you can't do that. But when enforcement is utilized, then I don't recommend enforcement. You're criminalizing homelessness, which doesn't work for the individual, doesn't work for the community. You can't keep someone in a jail
Yeah.
jail cell very long, and you haven't done anything for their foundational issue, their
Right.
fundamental issue, right? So what are you really accomplishing? Except digging a bigger hole for the individual, because now they have a record. All right,
Uh-huh.
and if you the citations, that keeps them from being able to get an apartment when a landlord tries to do a credit check or a criminal investigation, and then they see that an individual has been in jail or has these citations. It keeps the landlord from renting to that individual, right? So you've only dug a bigger hole for this individual. So you have it. So I mean, we at Father Joe's Villages, we advocate, yes, let's help people off the streets. It's not just for people to be on the streets, right? It's also, it's not helping anybody, either the individual or the community. Some individuals actually can't help themselves. They're mired in such a level of behavioral health challenges, mental health issues, as an example, where they can't help themselves. And so, the civil liberties in our society are sacrosanct, and well, they should be. I mean, we value our civil liberties, and yet it isn't humane to leave people on the streets who cannot help themselves, right? So
Right.
we have to come up with a prudent way of being able to help people off the streets who can't help themselves,
Yeah.
right? Without stripping them of their civil liberties, in a sense, and that's hard. That's hard to do. It's a challenge. So in answering your question, when people say they've come and they've cleaned up, it doesn't mean they have really addressed the issue of homelessness, because just enforcement and
Right.
cleaning up doesn't accomplish
Right.
that.
And what percentage of people on the streets do have the behavioral mental health challenges?
I can tell you that in San Diego, we have about 40%, about 37%, who have some level of mental health issues, and then about 30% have substance use issues, and some have both. And so those are big percentages if you think about it. And these are individuals who, again, don't necessarily, when you extend your hand, don't necessarily accept it. And so what do you do for them? I mean, as an example, we started at Father Joe's Villages back in 2019, the year before COVID hit. We started street health. Never been done in San Diego. I mean, we're always trying to come up with innovative ways of addressing the situation. We know that in 30% of those who are on the streets don't access health care in a typical brick and mortar fashion, traditional medicine. And so you have to go out to them, meet them where they are, which is what our clinicians started doing. They started meeting them to bind wounds, to dispense medication, as an example, to try to build relationship and try to get people then to come in for services, and not just health services, but also shelter services and housing services. And that takes time. It takes a lot of tenacity and to stick with it. This year, we now have added psychiatric clinicians to the team because of what I mentioned before. So many people are plagued with behavioral health issues. And again, meeting them where they are. That's the thing. You got to meet them where they are. If they don't want to come into a shelter, well, what other alternative can we have as a community to be able to help those individuals who don't want to come into a shelter, and you may not have an apartment for them, right? So how else can you help these individuals without just leaving them on the street?
And is that a big percentage, people that don't want shelters, you think? Or
It is. There is a percentage there. I mean, most people do want shelter. Most people, put it this way, most people want help. Wouldn't say they want shelter. A lot of individuals can't come into shelter, or they say they can't come into shelter because of past experiences, trauma that they've had in their lives. Maybe because they're seniors, and some shelters can't accommodate seniors. Maybe their families, and some shelters can't accommodate families units as well. So there are so many things that are at play in the lives of these individuals. It's co-occurring situations. It isn't, It is in some, with some it might be, well, I fell onto hard times and I fell onto the street, and that's one thing. With other individuals, yeah, employment could be a piece of it, but their health may be an aspect, and even on the health side, there might be comorbidities. So maybe an individual has high blood pressure, but they also have high blood sugar, and maybe some other things that play as well. And then maybe they have children. Okay, and it's the issue with how do you care for the children, right? While you try to find employment, and the challenges to that, and health and child care. And so that's why at Father Joe's Village it's such a great situation, because of the across the board comprehensive services, so that we'll care for your children, right? We have the psychologists and the teachers that are necessary there, because these kids who've been living on the streets, they typically are delayed academically, emotionally, socially. So how do you work with them, right? Where the families can feel comfortable in dealing with their own health issues and trying to find employment, right? Because they know their kids are safe. And how do you help the parents build familial bonds? Because a lot of them have never learned how to parent. Right? And so they don't have that role modeling in a sense. And how do you work? I mean, there's just so many aspects of it, Father.
Yeah, and I just saw a story like the last few months. I think they've had like 240,000 legal immigrants cross the border. And are you seeing a lot of that? Is that those people part of the numbers of the homelessness that you're counting? And because San Diego's pretty close to the border.
It is.
Is
Oh, it is.
It's right
it
there. Almost.
Yeah, and we do have a lot of immigrants coming in and refugees coming in. For the most part, they don't touch the homelessness situation, okay, because they are cared for by other organizations. For instance, Catholic Charities.
Oh.
Work with the refugees down in San Diego. And do some fall into homelessness? Some do. But for the most part, it's really, as they come through the border, Catholic Charities works with them. Okay. And in order to situate them, not necessarily in San Diego, maybe situate them in other cities, as an example, because there are programs that are in place from the government programs to address that.
Yeah. One time when I was out there for the Walk for Life, we're getting ready to do the rally and everything, we televise it, and I just started talking to these 3 or 4 like guys in their early 20s. They were homeless, but they were they were well spoken and everything. They enjoyed smoking pot and things, and they were actually lived in Birmingham for a while, and they hopped trains to get to California. I said, what drew you out here? He said, there's more services out here, medical services and things. And so they came, but it was I forgot why I brought that up, but it was I remember because they seemed like they were able to work, we're having a normal kind of conversation and everything, but maybe their issue was substance addictions and stuff. But
could be.
Yeah,
but I'm often asked, by the way, whether the climate and the services bring people from out of state into San Diego, and that's a question that we ask. Well, every year there's a point in time count that's done where about 1,500 volunteers at the end of January go out on one night and they canvass the canyons and so forth, and they count the number of who are homeless on the street, in shelters, in RVs, and cars, and so forth. And it's not a 100% accurate count, as you can imagine. But from year to year, at least it's a basis of being able to determine how many homeless you have on that given night. And that's used actually by HUD so that the city can be allotted federal dollars. So it's an important count. But in any case, one of the questions that's asked on a survey when people go out to be counted is when they fell into homelessness, where were they? And 85%, typically in every single year, about 85% say that when they fell into homelessness, they were in San Diego. So the majority do fall into homelessness in San Diego. People think it's the other way around, that people migrate there having been homeless elsewhere, and that's not the case. And that number those percentages stand pretty much the same if you compare them in other cities like New York. Like you would say, who would want to be homeless in New York? And yet it's because there's a level of transitory, let's say, within the homeless population. So most have been in San Diego when they fall into homelessness.
And I've wondered sometimes too, just about like with the immigration issue or something, or can we have a system to have people have whatever cars documentation to work in this area of the country, and after a handful of years they can live wherever they want or something. But just to, because it seems like we're having now, and I keep hearing this, like an employment crisis, like even the network, I think there's like 30 positions unfilled right now. I was talking to a police department, and they said they were having a lot of trouble filling these spots and stuff. And it seems like, I know, I just think sometimes like American ingenuity, if we're really motivated, we could maybe come up with some better solutions, and who want, I don't know, I know it's hard to live in different parts of the country, and maybe you have family in one area and it's complicated, but it seemed like we have a great need for people to work. We have a guy from the Midwest, and he said they were, Burger King was closing down on one day a week. They didn't have people to work, and it's like we got all these people. I know not all of them are able to work, but I don't know. It seems like we can do something to help distribute the employment.
The workforce.
Hey, workforce.
Well, it's been dubbed the Great Resignation, and that's the literally millions of individuals who have chosen just to quit their jobs.
Yeah.
And either because they've gone off to other employment that maybe has been paying better, or allowed more flexibility, because now again people want remote work a lot of times. That's this whole pandemic has really changed the landscape as far as labor and employment is concerned. And it's across the various industries. I know we have about 100 open positions at Father Joe's Villages as we speak, and that just creates a burden on the existing staff, because now they have to work even longer, and that's a stressful situation. I mean, when you work with our type of population, it's going to be very stressful and emotional and otherwise. And so, I mean, we're not immune to it. We at Father Joe's Villages. I mean, it's just across all the industries. It's just, I mean, I'm convinced that that'll change. And I think this will be a transition year, but I think it's going to be it'll change. It has to change. Right. So because a lot of, like you say, a lot of businesses are shutting down. As a result, I mean, we can't afford to shut down, God forbid. But it's challenging.
I get asked a lot, and I wonder what to do myself sometimes. When you're out in the street walking, somebody asks you for some money. What do you do?
Also another question I'm asked. I would recommend that you not give that person money. I would recommend that you find your local homeless services provider, and that you help them with the work that they do, because they are actually doing more than just giving a meal to an individual. Yes, the individual has to eat, obviously. That's basic. I mean, at Father Joe's Villages, by the way, we serve over 1 million meals a year. 2 dining rooms, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There's been additional food insecurity during COVID, and so we've increased actually our volume. But so meals are very, very important. They're basic. And so I know your heart goes out for the individual, and the immediacy that person needs a meal, they're usually providers in the area that will provide that, right? And provide that and more. Because while you may provide the meal for that moment in time, a few bucks for the moment in time, what happens come the next meal? What comes the next day, right? So that, and also you don't know whether the individual will use it for a meal or not, right? That's the other aspect of it. And so that's why I always recommend that people find the nearest homeless services provider and help them, and also direct that individual to that place where they could be helped in a bigger way. And if you feel totally compelled that you can't pass can't pass that individual, then I would recommend is you invite that person into the nearest store, supermarket or whatever, and then just buy them something that it's actual food that they'll have to. It's interesting sometimes when you offer to do that. Let me just buy you something from the store. They'll say, no, I just want the money.
Right.
So
And let's talk about your personal story. You worked for Citibank?
I did for many years.
In the heart of Manhattan.
I did.
Living the dream there, and making exorbitant profits there. And when I was in college, I think it was like 17% interest on a credit card. I don't know. But,
well, that wasn't all going into my pocket, but I was the vice president of Citibank for many, many years in various of their divisions. It's how I started out of school, actually. I was a graduate of New York University, and and that's where that's where I worked for many years.
Yeah. Tell us about that whole experience. I mean, now you're a deacon in the church. You're doing this great work. Tell us though. Tell us a little about your life and how
Yeah,
you
well,
got where you're at.
I will. I grew up. I think I may have mentioned I grew up in the South Bronx. My wife and I actually grew up in the same projects down in the South Bronx. I've known her since I was 12, and this year we'll be celebrating our 45th wedding anniversary. So it's been a long time. She's my rock. And we have 2 children now and some grandchildren as well, some grandsons. So we're excited about that.
You were born in Puerto Rico?
No, I was born in New York, actually. I'm a
Okay,
New Yorican. But my parents, as were her parents, she's Puerto Rican as well, were born on the island. And they immigrated up to New York. My father was a migrant worker in New Jersey when he first came. And my mother was a seamstress. And then they met in New York and got married. But yes, I was with Citibank many years. I was recruited out to San Diego to be one of the senior executives for a conglomeration of newspapers. It was headquartered out in La Jolla, actually, called Copley Newspapers, and they own papers around the country. And then that was privately owned, so the owner at one point decided he wanted to divest himself of all the interests, and I was on the team that helped him with that. In the meanwhile, I had been ordained a deacon, as you mentioned, and so as I discerned after that experience, I discerned, well, where did God want me next, and whether He wanted me to stay in the corporate life, or I decided that I would do parish work, and I did parish work actually. Our parish at Mary Star of the Sea in La Jolla. The parish work for 4 years, very different, as you can imagine, than what I have been doing. All the black cars were gone. I remember I used to come down from Citibank, get into a black car, and go home in the evening. Right now, not the case when you're doing parish work, nor do you need it. So I did that for 4 years, and then this job came along, and they asked me whether I'd be interested in doing it. Actually. I was approached by the board chair of the time because of my background. And it's a great combination, Father. I'm convinced that all the time at Citibank and elsewhere was really in preparation for this, because this organization, Father Joe's Villages, is very much a business. I mean, if you think of what I just mentioned here, the health center and the child care and employment and housing, developing housing, we also have a retail business because I have auction houses. Right, we have thrift stores as well. All the proceeds are for the benefit of the services that we have. These are all separate businesses, big businesses.
It's a nonprofit,
and it's a nonprofit, right? It needs to be run as a business, right? So all that business, the acumen actually that I harnessed over the years, let's say, really come into play here, and actually I get excited about that aspect of it, right? But then there's the pastoral piece of it and what we do. So that being a deacon, I think, so it's a great melding of the two. I just feel blessed in that regard.
Yeah, I think that's great. I know we've had a guest one time on the network. He would help like Catholic nonprofits get their business plan in order and all that, just so they can work, so it can survive, and this whatever good Catholic work they're doing. And I thought that is so great. And America should do that the best. We should be really good at that, as being able to have an organization functions, right? But so you grew up, you weren't well off, right? You went to New York University. That's a public university, I guess, or
no, it's a private university. New York University, even though it's New York, you have these named universities, and you think they're state-run universities, but they're really not. New York is a private university. Yeah.
Were you a good student?
I was a good student. I was good at knocking on doors, and when I say that, of organizations to get grants and financial aid. And so very early on, I learned to do that in order to be able to fund myself through the college years. My parents had no means to be able to do that. I mean, they were great. What they instilled in us a few things. They instilled in us to be hardworking, to get an education. They said that's the way to really do well in this country. Get an even though they each had about a 6th grade education, all right. But they were the oldest within their respective families, and so they had to go out to work actually when they were very young. But they instilled in us an education. They instilled in us a love of country, of being able to, a love of family, of course, and our faith. That was absolutely paramount. Having the faith and grounding everything in love of God and love of one another. And so that was all what they instilled in us. But the rest of it, like being able to fund the education at New York University, it was basically, as going out through, the one thing is that this country has great organizations out there that fund individuals who don't have the means in order to be able to go to good schools. And so the same thing was with my wife. She got some excellent educations as well. And by going out and seeking the funds. Yeah.
All right. And then as like early on, you started working for Citibank?
Right out of school, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, after I graduated. So I was
early 20s. To vice president?
I did, yeah, I did.
Wow. Is that the vice president, or are there many vice
presidents?
There's
many vice presidents. Citibank has many divisions and has many vice presidents,
right.
and of various groups, basically. Yeah.
And you're coming of age in the early 70s then?
Yeah, it was the early to mid 70s.
And how did you keep the faith? I mean, it seems like everybody's hippie and smoking pot, whatever.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I experienced that in those with whom I went to school, actually. And some of them actually got into a lot of trouble as a result of it. But I have to tell you, and again, the same thing with my wife, because she had a similar situation. Our faith was extremely important to us. Okay. And that grounded us. It really grounded us. That and family. I mean, the combination of the two. We came each from intact families,
right?
And we had our faith, and the combination of the two is what got us through. I didn't get into. I mean, I've never smoked marijuana. My wife hasn't either. Pot. I've never gotten to any of that stuff. It's not what we were about, you know. So again, I give the glory to God. I always give Him the glory. But and so that's why it's so important to give back. It's so important to make a difference in the lives of individuals, because we've been so very blessed in the whole process. Who would have thought that 2 kids from the South Bronx would have wound up in a place like La Jolla?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's incredible the way God works. And but there's a reason for it, right? And it wasn't for ourselves. And that's what we have to remind ourselves. It's not for ourselves. It's because of what He wants us to do for others, to make a difference in the lives of others. So yeah.
And you're a deacon, you preach at the parish and stuff?
Yeah, I preach at the parish.
What are some of the themes? You take all this in the melting pot of your life. What do you preach on today? What do you see today?
Basically the relationship that we should each have with our Lord, right? First and foremost. Sometimes, I want to get up, and you could probably relate to this as well. I mean, in your preaching, we're preaching about the same thing. Each and every single time, right? Of course, we use different stories, right? And the Gospels are great that way, because the Gospels are so rich, and you can have a scripture verse or scripture passage and preach on it one year, and then next year the very same passage, and you'll preach. Shows how the Spirit is working in your life, right, at the time. And yes, you have all that, but at the end of the day, what we're preaching is relationship with our Lord, right? Just falling in love with our Lord and the relationship with our Lord, and how what we should do is give Him glory. And so we are on this earth for no other reason but to give Him glory. And so the situation, wherever He has you, whether it's with family, so with your spouse, or with your children, or with your co-workers, or whatever the interactions are, everything should be geared to giving Him glory. If we got up each and every single day and throughout the day remembered that constantly, all right, and we're all human beings, we don't always remember that, right? But we would lead our lives in such a different way, so that when we encounter with one another, whatever the situation may be, if we remind ourselves, you know what, this encounter is meant to give God glory.
Right.
Okay. All right. If we just say it to ourselves, we would be in a better place. Now, we're human beings, and I, first and foremost, I fail constantly throughout the day, right? And we do, but tomorrow's another day, and you try again.
Yeah. Let's think about that's what theologians tell us. Yeah, God created the world, right, to manifest His glory, to show forth that glory.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, Deacon Jim, thank you so much for talking with us. This has been
Oh, thank
great.
you. This has been great. I mean, we just happened to run across one another this morning, and it was a God thing, right?
It was,
and
yeah.
so thank you for the invitation.
Yeah.
Pray for us out in San Diego. I'll keep your ministry in my prayers as well.
Thank you.